Hello everyone, and welcome back. When we look out across quiet fields and gentle hills, it is easy to believe that the ground beneath us has already told all its secrets. But every so often, the earth opens a small window into a world so old, so unexpected, that it feels almost unreal. Tonight, I want to take you there, to a place where an ordinary stretch of Scottish farmland suddenly revealed something astonishing. Welcome back, everyone. Settle in, breathe slowly, and let your imagination open just a little wider than usual. Because this story begins not with a dramatic discovery or a grand announcement, but with a simple survey carried out on a peaceful morning in July 2025. A group of archaeologists walked across a field near Carnoustie, Angus, a place where the wind drifts softly over grass and nothing seems out of the ordinary. No ruins, no stones, no signs of ancient life, just quiet land. And yet, hidden just beneath that calm surface was something no one expected. A structure older than Stonehenge, older than Britain's earliest recorded monuments, waiting patiently under layers of soil. Imagine that for a moment. 10, 20, 30 generations of people passing over the same ground, never sensing that an enormous wooden hall built nearly 6,000 years ago lay silently below. The discovery began with unusual shapes, picked up by ground-penetrating radar. Strange rectangles, straight lines, patterns nature does not usually create on its own. The kind of shapes that make archaeologists stop, lean a little closer, and whisper to each other, "This should not be here." What they uncovered would challenge everything we thought we knew about early life in Britain. Instead of wandering groups struggling to survive, it appeared that sophisticated communities had once gathered here. They planned, carved, measured, and raised a monumental building long before anyone dreamed of stone circles or giant standing stones. And the most intriguing part, no one knows exactly why it was built, or how such an enormous structure remained hidden for so long. So tonight, let us walk softly into this mystery together, back to the moment when Scotland revealed a secret it had guarded for 6 millennia. When the first layers of soil were brushed away, the archaeologists expected small finds, maybe pottery fragments, maybe a shallow fire pit, the usual hints of long-forgotten life. Instead, something far more dramatic began to appear. A dark line in the earth, then another, and another. Long, straight, unmistakably deliberate. The team paused, exchanged glances, and continued slowly. By midday, they realized they were not uncovering scattered debris from daily life. They were tracing the outline of something enormous. This was no small hut, no temporary shelter, no simple gathering place. It was the beginning of what would become one of the largest timber structures ever found from Britain's early Neolithic period. The beams themselves were the first to ignite real astonishment. Massive oak timbers, preserved far better than anyone expected, rested exactly where ancient builders had placed them nearly 6,000 years ago. Some stood upright, in deep post holes. Others had fallen long ago, but still held the shape of the hall they once supported. Each piece seemed to carry a quiet memory of the people who carved it, lifted it, and raised it into position. As the archaeologists traced the layout, a rectangular building gradually revealed itself, about 35 meters long and 9 meters wide. Imagine a structure roughly the size of a modern tennis court, constructed at a time when most communities were still adapting to farming life. It was the scale that unsettled expectations the most. Nothing of this size had been found this early in Britain's history, and yet here it was, hidden under a quiet Scottish field. What puzzled the team even more was the precision. The posts were not just placed, they were measured, aligned, and spaced with care. Every oak beam had been shaped by hand, smoothed with stone tools, and set with intention. This was not the work of a small group acting alone. It required planning, cooperation, and a shared purpose. Standing over the uncovered layout, archaeologists tried to imagine what the hall looked like when it stood tall. A long wooden roof, great beams rising from the earth, fires glowing inside, voices echoing across the interior. A place built not only to shelter people, but to bring them together. What kind of community had the knowledge, the tools, and the determination to create such a monumental building so early in history? That question lingered in the air, heavier than the soil they lifted away. As the excavation widened, the details hidden within the oak beams began to tell a story far older and far more intricate than anyone expected. At first glance, the posts looked like simple pieces of timber weathered, darkened, worn by thousands of years beneath the earth. But a closer look revealed something surprising. Delicate tool marks, smooth edges, and deliberate shaping that could not be dismissed as the result of chance. Every beam carried the signature of hands that worked with purpose. Imagine crafting a massive oak post using nothing more than polished stone blades and patient skill. No iron, no metal tools, no advanced saws or chisels. And yet these timbers were shaped with such precision that the archaeologists could still see the grooves left by ancient stone tools. Some of the cuts were clean, confident. Others showed repeated strokes, as if the builder paused, adjusted, and continued with steady intention. It became clear that whoever built this hall understood wood deeply, how it bends, how it dries, how it supports weight. They knew which trees to choose, which sections to carve, and how to position every post so the entire structure would stand strong against wind, weather, and time. The spacing of the posts was equally revealing. Each one was set at almost identical depths, aligned in straight rows that formed a perfect rectangle. That kind of uniformity does not appear by accident. It means planning, measurement, memory. It means a group of people shared the same vision of what they were building long before the first oak was cut. Even more intriguing were faint signs of additional shaping along the edges of some beams, subtle hints that the hall might have included decorative elements or structural reinforcements. These clues painted a picture of builders who were not simply focused on survival or shelter. They were crafting something meant to impress, something meant to endure, something meant to be seen. Archaeologists began to imagine the construction process itself, the rhythmic thud of stone tools against wood, the scent of fresh oak sap filling the air, voices calling out measurements, and teams lifting massive beams into place with ropes and determination. This was not just construction, it was coordination, on a scale no one believed existed this early in Britain's past. And with each uncovered detail, one question grew harder to ignore. How did a community from 4000 BC achieve such mastery? And what does that say about the society that built it? As the team moved deeper into the hall's interior, the soil began to shift from silent witness to active storyteller. What lay beneath the beams was not random debris from daily life. It was a carefully preserved snapshot of a community that once gathered here in ways that felt larger, louder, and far more meaningful than anyone expected for 4000 BC. The first clue came in the form of darkened earth, rich with soot. A small patch at first, then another, and then another. Slowly, a pattern emerged, a line of central hearths, evenly spaced from one end of the hall to the other. Not one fire for warmth, not two for cooking, but a series of glowing centers that would have lit the entire structure from within. You can almost imagine the sight, flames flickering across massive wooden beams, shadows moving along the walls, faces gathering around the glow during evenings that were colder and darker than ours. These hearths were not accidental. They were placed precisely, dividing the hall into meaningful zones. Right beside the hearths, the earth gave up more secrets, pottery fragments, some decorated with delicate patterns, others bearing the faint reddish tones of repeated use over open flame. These were not the possessions of a single household. This was pottery meant for groups, for serving, sharing, storing, and celebrating. Then came the bones. Not just a few scattered remains, but thousands of animal bones, cattle, sheep, pigs, many showing signs of roasting or butchering. The sheer volume suggested something far beyond a family meal. It pointed to gatherings, feasts, events that required planning and cooperation. Events that mattered. A picture started to form. This hall was not simply a shelter. It was a communal heart, a place where people came together, perhaps for rituals, celebrations, alliances, or decisions that shaped their world. Further into the hall, shallow grooves in the soil hinted at partitions or smaller internal spaces. Maybe these were areas reserved for particular groups. Maybe they held items of significance. Or maybe they served as private corners within a grand public building. Whatever the case, their presence reinforced the idea that this hall was more than a single-purpose structure. It was a stage for community life, and every artifact whispered that something important happened here. Yet for all these clues, the deeper meaning of these gatherings remains hidden. Were they joyful celebrations? Seasonal rituals? Meetings of leaders? The evidence invites us closer, but still holds its final answers just out of reach. As artifacts were carefully lifted from the soil and timbers were examined in controlled conditions, the next question loomed over the entire excavation. Exactly how old was this structure? The answer would decide whether this was simply an impressive local building, or something that would reshape our understanding of Britain's earliest communities. To solve that mystery, archaeologists turned to one of their most trusted tools, radiocarbon dating. Samples of charred wood from the hearths, fragments of preserved timber, and tiny organic traces sealed within the posts were sent to specialized laboratories. The waiting felt long, quiet, heavy with anticipation. And then the results arrived. They pointed to a date that made the team pause, read again, and then look up at each other with widening eyes. Around 4000 BC. This meant the hall was nearly 6 millennia old. Built at the dawn of Britain's early Neolithic era, a time when farming had only recently taken root in the islands, when communities were still learning how to cultivate fields, raise animals, and settle in one place. The implications were enormous. A building of this size, crafted with this level of precision, should not have appeared in a society just beginning its shift from nomadic life. And yet, here it was, standing in quiet defiance of everything historians believed about that period. It pushed the timeline of sophisticated communal architecture in Britain almost 1,000 years earlier than expected. Suddenly, the people of 4000 BC no longer felt like distant, struggling pioneers. They felt organized, capable, connected. People who planned far ahead, who understood materials, who worked together towards something bigger than individual survival. The dating also suggested that this hall belonged to the very first waves of agricultural settlement in Scotland. These early farmers had just begun to clear forests, shape land, and define territories. They were establishing rhythms for planting and harvesting, forming relationships with neighboring groups, and building new identities rooted in community life rather than constant movement. In that context, the hall became more than a structure. It became a symbol, a sign that early Neolithic societies were not merely adapting to a new way of life, but embracing it with ambition. But with every answer came a deeper question. If people in 4000 BC could build something this remarkable, what else were they capable of? And how much of their story still lies buried beneath the soil? With the age of the hall confirmed, archaeologists began to view the site through a different lens. It no longer felt like an isolated discovery, but rather a doorway into a world we rarely imagine, the everyday lives of some of Scotland's earliest farming communities. And the more the team studied the clues, the clearer it became that these people were far from the scattered, struggling groups once assumed. Life around 4000 BC was changing in ways that reshaped the entire region. Communities were moving away from wandering lifestyles and settling near fertile land where rivers offered fresh water and forests provided timber, game, and wild plants. The builders of this hall lived in a period of transformation, a moment when ideas, skills, and traditions flowed across landscapes, shaping a new way of life. Archaeologists imagine mornings beginning early, with people tending to barley fields glistening with dew or guiding cattle and sheep into open pastures. Others stayed closer to home, shaping pottery, sharpening stone tools, or preparing food for gatherings that would soon take place inside the hall. This was a society built on cooperation, where everyone had a role and every role supported the survival of the whole community. The evidence of trade is particularly fascinating. Some pottery styles and tool designs uncovered at similar sites show influences from regions far beyond Scotland. While we can't say these early farmers traveled across continents, it is clear they were not isolated. Ideas moved. Objects moved. People shared techniques, materials, and perhaps stories across great distances. This suggests that the Carnoustie Hall was not merely a local construction. It may have been part of a much larger network of early settlements connected by exchanges of goods and knowledge. And then there is the question of leadership. A project of this scale required planning, deciding where to build, how to divide labor, when to harvest timber, and how to coordinate a workforce strong enough to raise enormous beams into position. Yet there is no sign of a ruler in the modern sense. Instead, it seems this was a community that relied on shared effort and collective purpose. The hall reflects that spirit. It feels less like a monument to one person and more like a symbol of many people working together. Still, a quiet mystery lingers over it all. How did these early communities organize themselves so effectively, and why choose this spot, this moment in history, to create something so ambitious? Even as the hall revealed its shape, its age, and traces of the people who built it, one question refused to settle. Why was it created in the first place? Every discovery offered a clue, but none delivered a final answer. Instead, the site behaved like a storyteller that spoke in suggestions rather than declarations. The evidence of feasting was undeniable. Hearths lined in precise order, pottery shards scattered near fire pits, and the countless animal bones hinting at gatherings that must have echoed with voices and activity. But feasting alone could not explain a building of this scale. This was not just a place to eat. Something more had to be happening here. Some scholars imagine the hall as a ceremonial center, a place where seasonal gatherings or rituals were held. Perhaps communities from the surrounding region traveled here to renew social bonds, mark important changes in the year, or honor shared traditions that time has since erased. The thought of hundreds of people stepping through the entrance, greeted by warm firelight and the rising scent of roasted food, feels surprisingly vivid. Others see the hall as a kind of early administrative hub, a place where leaders met to settle matters that affected the whole community. Decisions about farming, land sharing, trade, and alliances would have required a gathering point. The hall's size, layout, and prominent placement suggest it could have served this exact role. There is even speculation about roles that blur the lines between the practical and the symbolic. In many early societies, the spaces where people met to plan, celebrate, and resolve conflict were also the places where they honored ancestors, shared stories, and reinforced identity. Perhaps this hall served all these purposes at once, a harmonious blend of daily life and spiritual meaning. Then there is the mystery of why it was eventually abandoned. Was it replaced by a newer structure? Was the surrounding land used differently over time? Or did changes in climate or population shift the patterns of life away from this place? No written records survive, and the soil can only tell so much. The hall stands as both an answer and a question, proof that early Neolithic people worked together in extraordinary ways, and a reminder that their motivations remain partly hidden. The silence of the site invites us to wonder. Did the people who once filled this hall expect it to be remembered? Or was it simply a milestone in a story still unfolding beneath the Scottish landscape? Before this discovery, the timeline of Britain's ancient monuments felt solid and familiar. We believed we knew the arc of early architecture, simple huts first, scattered settlements next, and only much later, centuries later, the rise of monumental structures like Stonehenge or Avebury. Those were the landmarks that defined early Britain in our minds. Impressive circles of stone, carefully aligned with the sky, built by communities already well organized and steeped in sophisticated tradition. But as the Carnoustie Hall emerged from the soil, that comfortable timeline began to unravel. Here was a structure nearly 1,000 years older than Stonehenge, crafted with such precision and ambition that it forced archaeologists to reconsider nearly everything they thought they knew. Instead of imagining early communities as hesitant beginners, taking their first unsure steps into settled life, the hall suggested something different. Societies that were coordinated, experienced, and capable of complex construction far earlier than anyone expected. The design itself challenged assumptions. The symmetrical layout, the long central corridor, the evenly spaced posts, all of it spoke of planning. Not improvisation, not chance, but a clear architectural vision. And this vision existed long before the famous stone monuments that dominate our understanding of Neolithic Britain. It also raised a new question, one that felt both exciting and unsettling. What other timber monuments have vanished without a trace? Stone endures. Timber returns to the earth. That simple truth means the archaeological record may be heavily biased toward the materials that survive. The great wooden halls, ceremonial structures, gathering places, and ancient meeting spaces that once stood across the landscape may have silently decayed, leaving barely a mark unless they happen to fall into the rare conditions that preserve wood for millennia. The Carnoustie Hall, then, might not be an extraordinary exception, but the first surviving member of a forgotten family of early monuments, a hint of a larger story we have been missing simply because time favored stone over wood. And yet, the hall also connects Britain to a broader Neolithic world. Similar timber structures from the same era have been uncovered in Germany and Denmark, suggesting that early European societies shared traditions, ideas, and architectural styles. This discovery does not just rewrite a local chapter of history, it opens a new one, revealing a more complex and interconnected ancient world than we ever imagined. And with every new insight, the mystery deepens. If this hall survived long enough for us to find, how many others once stood proudly, and how many still lie hidden, waiting beneath quiet fields? One of the most haunting realizations that emerged from the Carnoustie discovery is this: we may have been looking in the wrong places all along. For generations, our understanding of ancient Britain has been shaped almost entirely by stone. Stone circles, stone tombs, stone alignments etched against the sky. These monuments stand defiantly through time, untouched by weather, surviving fire, frost, and the collapse of centuries. They are visible, permanent, unavoidable. But wood has a different fate. Timber breathes. It bends. It decays. It returns to the soil, leaving little behind, beyond faint discolorations, subtle post holes, and fragile traces invisible to the human eye. Unless conditions are perfect, waterlogged, sealed, or undisturbed, wooden monuments vanish long before anyone can rediscover them. And that is the quiet revelation the Carnoustie Hall whispered to archaeologists. Maybe this world of early monuments was never dominated by stone at all. Maybe stone was simply what endured. The hall's survival was a perfect accident of nature, just the right soil, just the right moisture, just the right depth. Had any one of those factors shifted, even slightly, the entire structure might have disappeared without a trace, taking its story with it. This realization unsettled scholars. If one wooden monument survived by chance, how many others once stood proudly across ancient Britain? How many vast halls, ceremonial buildings, gathering spaces, or early community centers simply dissolved back into the earth unnoticed, unrecorded, unimagined? Suddenly, the landscape felt different. Every hill, every field, every quiet patch of farmland carried the possibility of something hidden beneath its surface. Modern technology, ground-penetrating radar, LiDAR, aerial scanning began to reveal geometric shapes, linear patterns, and buried outlines previously overlooked. Not stone circles, not tombs, but timber footprints of structures long gone. It is almost eerie to think about. Countless wooden halls may have stood across the region, glowing with firelight, filled with gatherings, rituals, decisions, celebrations, only to vanish silently as if they had never existed. Carnoustie's Hall, then, is not merely a rare discovery, it is a reminder that early societies expressed their identity, their unity, and their ambition in ways time rarely preserves. This realization opens the imagination in a way that feels almost unsettling. If one forgotten monument can rewrite early history, what secrets still sleep beneath the ground, waiting for the right moment to rise again? Even after the last timber was documented, the last soil sample collected, and the final trench carefully filled in, the sense of completion never truly settled over the team. Instead, there was a different feeling, a quiet awareness that this discovery was not an ending, but the opening note of something much larger. Because if one monumental hall from 4000 BC could remain hidden for millennia beneath a calm Scottish field, then what else might be resting in silence just out of sight? In recent years, advances in archaeological technology have begun to unveil landscapes previously considered empty. LiDAR scans from drones and aircraft now sweep across hillsides, forests, and farmland, peeling back layers of vegetation to reveal the subtle shapes of buried worlds. Linear patterns, faint rectangles, and forgotten boundaries glow to life in digital maps, whispering, "Look here." And in the regions surrounding the Carnoustie site, those scans began to show hints, not definitive shapes, not confirmed buildings, but shadows of possibility. Slight anomalies in the soil, edges that did not belong to natural formations, just enough to make archaeologists pause. Excavation plans expanded almost immediately, not out of excitement alone, but because the evidence suggested that the hall may not have stood alone. Perhaps there were smaller buildings nearby, perhaps a settlement, perhaps additional halls that once formed a larger ceremonial complex. The idea was not far-fetched. Similar Neolithic gathering centers in other parts of Europe often included clusters of structures, each with its own purpose. Upcoming digs aim to explore these possibilities. Teams will examine areas east of the hall where ground-penetrating radar has detected unusual formations. Soil samples will be tested for ancient pollen and seeds, helping researchers reconstruct the landscape as it appeared thousands of years ago. Archaeologists hope to learn whether the hall stood in isolation or whether it marked the heart of an entire community whose traces have yet to surface. What makes this so fascinating is the profound sense of anticipation surrounding the region. It is rare for an archaeological site to feel alive, as though the ground itself is waiting to reveal the next chapter. But Carnoustie has that atmosphere, a quiet promise that more secrets linger beneath the soil. And perhaps the most thrilling thought of all is this: the next discovery might not just reshape our understanding of the Neolithic world, it might transform it entirely. As we step back from the trenches, from the timbers, from the faint lines in the soil that once held the weight of an ancient roof, a quiet realization settles in. The story of the Carnoustie Hall is not simply the story of a single structure. It is the story of everything we thought we understood about early Britain and everything we still have yet to learn. The hall rose at a moment when communities were just beginning to settle, farm, and build a new kind of life. And yet its scale, its craftsmanship, and its purpose all hint at a people who were already far more organized, far more connected, and far more ambitious than history ever gave them credit for. In its beams we see the marks of hands guided by skill. In its hearths, the glow of gatherings that once shaped decisions and identities. In its bones and pottery, the echoes of voices rising together in shared space. And perhaps the most haunting part is this: the hall almost vanished completely. Had the soil been slightly drier, the wood slightly more exposed, or the field disturbed just a little differently, this chapter of history might have dissolved into the earth forever. Which means there are likely other stories, entire worlds, entire communities still hidden beneath the quiet landscapes we pass every day. The discovery reminds us that the past is not a straight line. It is a buried forest of forgotten paths, and every so often one rises to meet us. Yet for every question the Carnoustie Hall answers, it offers two more, lying in wait like soft footprints leading over a ridge into the unknown. What else lies beneath Scotland's fields? What other halls once stood tall, lit by firelight and filled with life? And what chapters of humanity will surface next, carried to us on the patient hands of time? As archaeologists prepare their next excavations, as new scans sweep across untouched land, we stand on the edge of discovery once again, listening, imagining, wondering. Thank you for joining me on this quiet journey into the deep past. If you are still here, still awake, still curious, then let that curiosity linger a little longer. Because out there, under layers of earth and centuries of silence, history is waiting, and it may yet surprise us again. Good night, and until our next exploration,